If you enjoy this podcast, then you will definitely enjoy our newest audiobook on Spotify, Sleep Stories and Meditations, Volume 1, a soothing collection, hypnotic tales designed for those looking to relax and drift into deep, restful sleep. Written by Joel Thielke, these calming stories are perfect for unwinding at the end of the day. Check it out and help support this podcast.
Wind in the sails, let's take flight to distant lands beyond the sight. Giants and lilliputs alike in a world where dreams take flight. Gulliver's tales, they twist and turn.
Settle into a comfortable spot, take a deep breath, and allow your imagination to guide you toward a place of wonder. In the distance, waves lap against the shores of a realm you may have visited once before, a place of grand lessons, warm friendships, and the promise of new beginnings. Our tale follows Gulliver, older and wiser, as he returns to the fabled Gulliver's Isles. Here, friends from yesteryear stand ready to remind us all that growth and wisdom don't come overnight, but through the richness of shared stories, open hearts, and open minds. So snuggle in, and let the gentle glow of the lighthouse lead us into the journey that awaits. Chapter 1. The Call of the Sea. Gulliver stood at the edge of the wharf, gazing out at the horizon. The rolling sea stretched before him in deep blues and greens, reminding him of a dear old friend inviting him back into a realm of untold possibilities. A gull cried overhead, and the crisp morning breeze tousled his hair. No longer the vibrant colour it once was, but a softer hue touched by time's gentle hand. He had travelled far and wide over many years, from busy ports bustling with trade to quiet shores where only seabirds kept him company. Yet the thought of returning to Gulliver's Isles tugged at his heart in a way he could hardly explain. It was as though the ocean itself whispered his name, coaxing him to set sail for those familiar islands that had once changed his life so profoundly. In his youth, Gulliver had stumbled upon these isles more by accident than design. At the time, he was a different person. Ambitious, yes, but also brimming with hubris and hardly the wisest traveller to step aboard a ship. His encounters with the islanders had shown him the importance of humility and cooperation, lessons that had shaped his later life. Now, standing at the threshold of this new chapter, he felt called back to see how the passage of time had softened both him and the place he so fondly remembered. Slowly, he walked toward a modest ship named the Sea Maiden, an upgrade from the rickety vessels he once captained. The deckhands greeted him politely, their eyes lighting up with curiosity. He responded with a warm grin, feeling the thrill of travel churn in his stomach. With the practiced ease of a man who has long danced with the sea, he boarded, took his place at the helm, and tipped his head in a quiet salute to the gull perched on a barrel nearby. "Off we go, my friend," Gulliver murmured, and the gull squawked as if in agreement. As the ship departed the harbour, Gulliver let his thoughts wander. His mind drifted to the recollection of tiny Lilliputians scurrying around him in the past, back when he was a giant in a land of miniatures. And then there were the Brobdingnagians, towering over him like ancient trees. He also remembered the noble Houyhnhnms, whose rationality and gentle ethics had made him question his own nature. Each experience had left its mark, yet as he aged, he often wondered if the friends he had made during those travels had also changed. Did they, like him, grow more patient, more understanding? Or did they cling to old ways in a rapidly changing world? The Sea Maiden cut through the water, sails snapping in the wind. Seabirds circled overhead, Wisps of cloud trailed across the sky, forming fleeting shapes. A feather, a horse's head, a giant's profile. He squinted, imagining them to be omens or maybe just playful illusions conjured by his mind. Either way, they set him reflecting on the countless adventures life had given him. By midday the sun hung high, warming the deck. Gulliver retreated to the small cabin to review his maps. He had studied them thoroughly, noting the best route to the Isles. Although smaller vessels and more advanced navigational methods existed now, something about relying on old charts comforted him. It was like listening to a well-worn story that still held meaning after all these years. His determination to see how the islanders had fared was unwavering. Perhaps he would finally find some closure for questions that had lingered in his mind. In the quiet moments, he wondered if those he once knew remembered him. Would they greet him like a friend, or treat him as a curious outsider, a relic from the past? The very thought of stepping ashore again filled him with both excitement and trepidation. Late in the afternoon, the wind grew stronger. The sea maiden surged forward, each wave gently rocking the vessel. Gulliver closed his eyes, letting the steady, rocking motion soothe him into a moment of reflection. He found that the further he sailed, the more at peace he felt, like a traveller returning not just to a faraway land, but also to a vital part of himself. With nightfall, a blanket of stars spanned the sky. Gulliver scanned the horizon, recalling the hush that seemed to descend on the ocean at this hour. It was the same hush that had once lulled him into fantasies of adventure when he was younger. Now, older, he found comfort in the familiar hush, like meeting an old friend who speaks without words. Before turning in for the night, he made a final note in his journal. I set forth to rediscover what time has done to friends once dear and lessons once learned. May the seas be kind, the winds be fair, and my heart open to the wonders that await. Clutching the journal against his chest, he let out a small, hopeful laugh. Sometimes the call of the sea is less about distance and more about coming home to what truly matters. Chapter 2. Arrival at Gulliver's Isles. Morning light broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of peach and lavender. Gulliver stirred from his brief rest, greeted by the gentle splash of waves against the ship. The wind had quieted during the night, and with that calmness came a hush of anticipation. He stepped out onto the deck and squinted at a shape forming in the distance. A tall silhouette jutted skyward, like a lone sentinel. As he drew closer, he realized it was a lighthouse, its ivory tower gleaming in the rising sun. Gulliver's heart fluttered. He didn't recall a lighthouse on Gulliver's Isles before. This must have been one of the many changes time had introduced. Breath catching in his throat, he navigated the Sea Maiden toward the dock. The ship glided through turquoise waters that were surprisingly clear. He peered overboard and saw clusters of fish swirling below, shimmering in the morning light. Closer to the shore, coral reefs seemed to wave a soft, underwater welcome. Finally, the anchor dropped with a thunk. Gulliver disembarked, stepping onto the wooden planks of the dock. The moment his feet touched solid ground, he felt a sense of familiarity wash over him like a warm tide. Nearby, a few islanders bustled around, unloading crates, gathering fishing nets and mending sails. Each paused to give him a curious glance, some breaking into bright smiles once they realized who he was. "Gulliver!" called a fisherman, whose beard seemed to have grown grey from the years. "Back again after all this time, are you?" Gulliver offered a wave and a grin. "Aye, it's been quite a while. Looks like the place has grown up since I last saw it." And indeed, the changes were evident everywhere. Neat cottages lined the shore. Gardens teemed with colourful flowers, pale pinks, deep purples, and radiant yellows. Children's laughter danced on the breeze. Beyond the cottages, the gentle slope of a hill led to the lighthouse he'd spotted from afar, grand and sturdy, guiding seafarers with its steady beam. Yet for all the newness, something in the air felt reassuringly old. A sense of calm, a spirit of warmth, seemed woven into every breeze. Even the gulls circling overhead looked at peace, as if they too approved of how the island had matured. Gulliver's gaze swept across the docks, landing on clusters of people chatting amicably. The chatter was subdued, not frantic. He recalled how the island had once been steeped in rivalries, petty disputes that threatened unity. Now that tension appeared replaced by a shared sense of purpose. Where once there had been suspicion, there was now community. He soon found himself walking along a winding path leading away from the shore. On either side, palm trees gently swayed, their fronds brushing against the bright morning sky. Familiar yet changed, like seeing an old friend who's grown into their best self. An elderly woman approached, balancing a basket of shells on her hip. "Well, if it isn't the famous traveller himself," she said, her smile revealing laugh lines that suggested a joyful life. "We've been expecting you." Gulliver blinked. "You have?" She chuckled. "News travels fast on a small isle. Word's been passed around that you were heading this way. Welcome home." Those words, "welcome home," stirred something deep within him. Home. Was that how the islanders saw him? He'd come here a stranger, so many moons ago. And yet, he too felt the comforting embrace of homecoming, as though this land claimed him, recognized him. Nearing the base of the lighthouse, Gulliver paused to marvel at its architecture. From up close, he noticed intricate carvings of ships, waves, and celestial symbols around the entryway. The structure was far more grand than he had anticipated. Its walls had an ivory sheen, almost radiant in the morning sun. His moment of awe was broken by an approaching figure with a bright grin and purposeful stride. "Gulliver!" the figure shouted. "I can't believe it's really you." The man wore sturdy boots and a captain's coat, though he looked more like a wise statesman than a swaggering sailor. His hair was streaked with silver, and small creases framed his eyes. Gulliver's stomach flipped. Could this be the one who had once been the Emperor of Lilliput in all his pomp and vanity? If so, he was barely recognizable. Maturity had softened him. "Welcome, my old friend," the man said, extending a hand. "I'm Captain Thorne now. Some here still joke and call me Emperor, but I'm a different person these days." Gulliver grasped his hand firmly. "It's good to see you, Thorne. It's been too long." Thorne's smile stretched ear to ear. "We've got plenty of catching up to do, but first, let me show you around. The island's changed, yes, but in many ways it's exactly as you left it, just wiser, calmer." Gulliver's chest swelled with gratitude. He'd expected some recognition, maybe even a cautious welcome, but this open-hearted reception was more than he could have hoped for. He sensed that in returning, he might discover answers to the questions that had lingered in his mind for so long. Or perhaps he would gain entirely new questions to carry with him on the next leg of his journey. As Captain Thorne led him away from the lighthouse, Gulliver glanced back at it once more. Its shining beacon stood tall against the sky, a guardian of both the island's past and the promise of its future. Little did he know, the secrets hidden within those gleaming walls would soon beckon him to uncover a deeper understanding of the island, of his old companions, and of himself. Chapter 3. Meeting Captain Thorne. They strolled along a sand-dusted path that traced the shoreline, the rhythmic sound of waves providing an easygoing soundtrack to their reunion. Captain Thorne guided Gulliver past neat little bungalows trimmed with seashells and driftwood. Children scurried about, chasing each other between fishing nets and barrels of fresh-caught shrimp, their laughter sweet as birdsong. At every turn, Gulliver noticed how the island hummed with contentment, as if it had found its groove in the grand orchestra of life. Gone were the factions and bitter feuds he vaguely remembered. In their place, he saw groups of neighbours working together, some building small rafts, others painting signs, and still others busily tending to communal gardens. Eventually, they arrived at a modest courtyard in front of a large wooden hall. This place, Thorne explained, served as a meeting space for the entire island. Gulliver found himself studying the intricately carved doorposts and the mural along the side, a sweeping scene depicting ships navigating rough seas, guided by a bright beacon of light. "You've come at just the right time," said Thorne, his voice carrying a kindly authority. "We're having a gathering tonight. Not a grand festival or anything fancy, just a community dinner. But I'm hoping you'll join us so everyone can say hello." Gulliver nodded, touched by the invitation. "I'd be honoured. By the way, I can hardly recognise the place. Everything seems renewed," Thorne responded with a knowing smile. "Time can do wonderful things, my friend. You should have seen the petty quarrels we had in the past. Over trifles, really. Flags, eggs, whether the correct side was up or down. We nearly tore ourselves apart with our stubbornness." Gulliver's brow furrowed. "I recall those disputes. They seemed so important then, but now—" Captain Thorne let out a gentle laugh. "We learned the hard way that focusing on differences makes you blind to what really matters. Working together, thriving together, finding joy in shared goals. That's the philosophy we embrace now. Somewhere along the line, we realized community triumphs over conflict." They continued walking, a gentle breeze cooling the afternoon heat. Seagulls circled overhead, occasionally diving to snatch fish close to the water's surface. Gulliver's curiosity about Thorne's transformation bubbled up. "You're not the proud emperor I once knew," Gulliver remarked, half in jest. "I remember a man who demanded grand feasts, elaborate parades, and had little time for dissenting voices." Thorne chuckled, and the corners of his eyes crinkled. Guilty as charged. Being emperor was exhausting, and if I'm honest, the constant flattery and fear-based respect made me miserable. Letting go of the title was a relief. Now I'm simply Captain Thorne, a leader when needed, a friend always. Gulliver heard the sincerity in his tone. It was a remarkable shift from the proud figure who once measured his self-worth in pageantry. Thorne seemed calmer, more grounded. This, Gulliver thought, was the kind of leadership that inspired, rather than intimidated. A group of islanders waved them over from a produce stand. It smelled of oranges, bananas, and sweet herbs. As they approached, Thorne introduced Gulliver to each vendor. They greeted him warmly, offering small samples of fruit, praising the flavour as though it were a gift from the island's spirit itself. "You see," Thorne said after they moved on, "we're a collaborative bunch now. Everyone pitches in, farmers, fishers, artisans, even the children. We make decisions as a group and hold each other accountable. It's not perfect, of course, but it's made us stronger and more harmonious than ever." Gulliver found himself quietly impressed. He remembered how the original Lilliputian society had been so rooted in rigid hierarchies. Now, here stood their former leader, speaking about unity and shared responsibility. The transformation was almost unbelievable. They reached a small harbour area dotted with rows of boats. The tang of salt and seaweed hung in the air, reminiscent of old adventures. Wooden piers stretched over calm water, and small crab traps lay neatly stacked nearby. Thorne guided Gulliver to a spot where they could sit on a stone bench, right by the water's edge. "Sometimes, in the early morning hours, I come out here to watch the sunrise," Thorne said, resting his palms on his knees. It reminds me of the bigger picture, how trivial some of our squabbles used to be. When you face that vast horizon, you realize how small we are in the grand scheme of things. Gulliver nodded. A sense of peace settled over him. He realized how much he had in common with Thorne now, the desire to reflect, to learn from mistakes, and to find meaning in everyday life. For Gulliver, the sea had always served as his teacher, showing him that tides must ebb and flow, storms must come and go, and yet life keeps renewing itself. A wave splashed against the rocky shore, sending a spray of cool mist over their feet. Thorne glanced at Gulliver, seriousness creeping into his tone. "There's one more place I'd like to show you before we turn in for the day. The lighthouse. It's become more than just a structure. It's a symbol of unity and a source of guidance for all of us." Gulliver thought back to the imposing tower he'd seen upon arrival. "It's impressive. I can't wait to see it up close." Thorne stood, brushing off his pants. "Then let's make our way up there. I believe you'll find that Lighthouse has a tale of its own, and if I'm not mistaken, our dear Alara helped design its most intricate features. You do remember Alara?" A flicker of memory sparked in Gulliver's mind, a ruler of giants who possessed a heart as big as her stature. "Alara, indeed I remember her. She was kind and fair, and if I recall, quite the visionary." "Precisely," Thorne said, eyes twinkling. "Come, let's make the climb together. Afterward we'll have a feast, and you'll get to meet everyone properly. But first, a tour of the island's pride and joy." As they made their way toward the lighthouse's winding path, Gulliver felt a swell of anticipation. Much had changed, and yet each conversation revealed how growth and wisdom had become the island's new hallmarks. The pettiness was gone, replaced by a spirit of harmony. He couldn't help but wonder what other surprises awaited, and how this place might once again shift his perspective on the world. Before they began the climb, Gulliver paused to take in the scene once more. Neighbours passing goods between them, laughter echoing, waves lapping. Captain Thorne had changed, the island had changed, and perhaps Gulliver, too, would find that he was changing, right alongside them. The notion filled him with hope, reminding him that life's chapters are never truly closed. They simply lead us to new pages waiting to be read. Chapter 4. The Wise Artisan, Alara. The winding trail leading to the lighthouse zigzagged across a gently sloping hill. Along the way, the vegetation turned lush, an abundance of flowering shrubs, with bursts of pink, purple, and yellow that seemed almost too vibrant to be real. Every now and then, the path opened up to a panoramic view of the sea, shimmering like a grand mosaic. Gulliver paused at nearly every clearing, momentarily forgetting his destination as he admired the spectacle before him. Eventually, they reached a simple workshop nestled against a rocky outcrop, not far from the base of the lighthouse. Smoke curled from a small chimney, and the sound of metal clinking drifted through the open door. Thorne grinned, pushing aside a wooden plank serving as a makeshift door. "Alara's domain," he said. "Though she's got a full workshop in the village, she prefers the tranquility up here." Inside, Gulliver found himself in a veritable maze of crafting tables, easels, and half-finished sculptures. Wooden carvings of ships and sea creatures sat next to clay pots adorned with intricate patterns. A large loom stood in the corner, its threads taut and shimmering in the sunlight that flooded through open windows. Tools hung from pegs on the walls, neatly arranged, each telling a story of skill and patience. And in the midst of this creative storm was Alara herself. She was tall, though not a towering giant like in the old days, yet she carried herself with a poised grace that immediately commanded respect. Her hair, streaked with silver, was pinned back to keep out of her eyes as she worked on what appeared to be a massive relief carving, As they entered, she turned, revealing a warm smile that reached her eyes. "Gulliver," she said, her voice deep yet gentle. "So you've come back to us at last. It's been far too long." He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. "Alara, it's an honor to see you again. Captain Thorne tells me you've been quite busy." She let out a hearty laugh. "Busy is an understatement, dear friend. There's always something new to create, something old to preserve. This island is full of stories begging to be told in wood, metal, or clay. And me?" She tapped a chisel against the carving. "I've dedicated my life to telling those stories." Thorne stepped forward. "If it's not too much trouble, Alara, I'd like to show Gulliver the new additions to the lighthouse. I'm certain he'd appreciate the craftsmanship." Alara set down her chisel and moved toward a side table where a series of sketches lay. "Allow me," she said, picking up a few drawings. "I designed several of the lighthouse's features, blending traditional island motifs with modern navigational needs. It's more than just a tower. It's a symbol of what we strive for, to guide each other with light, not force." Gulliver studied one of the sketches. It depicted a spiral staircase with carved banisters resembling waves, leading up to a glass-encased lantern room. Symbolic shapes of the sun and moon were etched into the walls, representing the interplay of time, day, and night. He marveled at the level of detail. "This is extraordinary," he whispered. Alara's eyes glowed with pride. "Thank you. My aim was to create something that both stands for the island's heritage and embodies the journey we've all taken, shedding old conflicts, embracing cooperation, and learning to illuminate one another's lives." Captain Thorne gently placed a hand on Gulliver's shoulder. Before the lighthouse, ships would often crash against the rocky edges at night. The islanders kept building small beacons, but they were always short-lived. It was Alara who envisioned something grand, something that would last for generations. Alara nodded. "I recruited young artisans from across Gulliver's Isles and taught them craftsmanship. Woodworking, metalworking, glass-making. In turn, they taught me new methods that I'd never considered before. It was a shared endeavor, bridging age, skill, and creativity." As Gulliver listened, he felt an inexplicable wave of admiration. In his past travels, he remembered the Brobdingnagian king as wise and dignified, but also somewhat apart from the lives of everyday people. Now, in Alara, he saw a mentor who rolled up her sleeves, fostering the next generation. Her wisdom was evident in every inch of the workshop, from the communal tools to the lively art pieces. She beckoned them closer to the massive carving she'd been working on. It depicted a scene of island life. Fishermen casting their nets, healers tending to the sick, artisans crafting goods, and children at play. Above it all, a radiant lighthouse beamed across the scene. "It's a snapshot of our life here," she said, tapping the wooden relief gently. "We'll install it at the lighthouse's entrance once it's finished." Gulliver ran his fingers across the carved figures, marveling at the texture and detail. "I can almost hear the chatter and feel the sunlight in this piece. How remarkable." Alara grinned. "Art has a way of freezing moments, doesn't it? It reminds us of where we've been and where we're going." Together, they left the workshop and continued up the trail toward the lighthouse. Along the way, Alara explained how she'd taken bits of wisdom from her Brobdingnagian heritage, particularly the focus on moral uprightness and the value of empathy, and integrated them into her mentorship. She believed that creativity flourishes most when people collaborate, and that the heart of artistry is not just skill but kindness, shared learning, and the willingness to inspire one another. As they ascended the lighthouse's outer steps, Gulliver's eyes widened at the panoramic view unfolding beneath them. The entire island stretched out in a patchwork of verdant fields, sparkling coastline, and clusters of thatched roofs. The swirl of life, people, animals, the relentless pulse of nature, seemed both vast and intimately connected. Reaching the top, they stepped into the lantern room. Sunlight filtered through glass panels, casting shimmering rainbows along the walls. In the center stood a magnificent bronze apparatus, housing a large curved lens. It looked modern, yet the bronze etched with sea patterns and stylized waves gave it a timeless elegance. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Alara asked, resting a hand on the apparatus. "It runs on a blend of oil and wind-up mechanics. We used local resources and a few new innovations from passing travelers. It can emit light for days on end." Gulliver could barely find words to express his admiration. "This is more than I ever imagined. You've truly turned this island into a living tapestry of art, community, and guidance." Captain Thorne and Alara exchanged a satisfied look. "It was a group effort," Thorne said. "Alara is the guiding hand for the artisans, but every islander contributed in some way. Supplies, ideas, even moral support." Feeling a surge of gratitude, Gulliver leaned against the railing that circled the lantern room's exterior walkway. The sea beyond glistened, and the breeze ruffled his hair. Beneath him lay a community thriving on collective wisdom, anchored by a beacon that stood for unity rather than dominance. In that moment, Gulliver caught Alara's eye, and she gave him a knowing smile. It was as if she understood what he was thinking, how this place offered living proof of growth, connection, and the enduring power of creativity. Standing atop the lighthouse, Gulliver experienced a sense of peace. He felt it in the warmth of the sun, in the gentle kindness of two dear friends, and in the radiant lens waiting to guide ships through the dark. He realized that while the sea had drawn him here, it was the light of friendship, collaboration, and hope that had truly called him home. Chapter 5. Saraphina the Healer. After descending from the lighthouse and bidding temporary farewells to Alara, Gulliver followed Captain Thorne along a winding path toward the island's interior. The sounds of crashing waves gradually faded, replaced by the soft chirping of birds in the dense foliage. The air grew cooler, tinged with the smell of moist earth and wild herbs. "Saraphina's clinic is just a short walk from here," Thorne said, navigating a path dappled with sunlight filtering through tall palm fronds. "Be prepared. She's about as calm as the ocean at dawn, but her wisdom runs as deep as the sea itself." Saraphina. The name conjured memories of the noble houyhnhnms, horse-like beings known for their upright morals, rational thought, and harmony with nature. Gulliver recalled their society as one that held truth and reason above all else, living in a balance that eluded many human societies. He was curious to see how Saraphina embodied these values now, as a guide and healer for Gulliver's Isles. They emerged into a small clearing, at the center of which stood a circular structure made of woven reeds and sturdy timber. Vines with violet flowers climbed up the walls, and a gentle breeze stirred clusters of wind chimes crafted from seashells and bamboo. The melodic tinkling offered a tranquil welcome. Inside, Saraphina's clinic felt like an extension of nature itself. Soft rugs covered a smooth, earthen floor. Potted plants and herbs lined a low shelf, filling the space with fresh, invigorating scents: chamomile, mint, lavender, and more. A skylight in the roof let in a shaft of sunshine, creating an airy, serene atmosphere. And there was Saraphina. She moved with an unhurried grace, her robes a gentle blend of earthy greens and browns. Her face was serene but showed lines of warmth and laughter around her eyes. She was speaking quietly to a young mother whose child had a bandaged knee. Saraphina finished her examination, offered a kind smile, and then guided them both to a side area where a soft mat and some herbal ointments waited. When she spotted Thorne and Gulliver, she acknowledged them with a small, welcoming bow. "Captain Thorne and Gulliver, I've been expecting you. Her voice was smooth, like a gentle stream. Gulliver stepped forward, inclining his head respectfully. Saraphina, thank you for receiving me. Your clinic is lovely. It's a world away from the bustling docks. She smiled. We all contribute in the ways we know best. For me, that's healing, of the body, mind, and spirit. She gestured to a row of potted plants. These herbs have been gifted to me by many travellers. I combine them with local remedies to create holistic treatments. We've made quite a few strides in integrating old and new methods here on Gulliver's Isles. Captain Thorne took his leave, mentioning that he had some duties to attend to before the evening gathering. But you two go on, he said, placing a hand on Gulliver's shoulder. I'm certain there's much to talk about. With a parting nod, Thorne stepped outside, leaving Gulliver and Saraphina alone in the softly lit space. She invited him to sit on a cushion near a low table, and he complied, feeling the gentle give of the soft fabric beneath him. How have you been, Gulliver? She asked, arranging some dried leaves in a clay bowl on the table. I sense a weight on your shoulders, memories perhaps, or questions left unanswered. The subtlety of her insight took him by surprise. He realized she looked at him not just with her eyes, but with a deeper sense of perception. I suppose I have both, he admitted. Returning here, seeing so many changes, I can't help but reflect on my own journey. I've grown older, but have I grown wiser? I'm not entirely sure. Saraphina nodded. Aging naturally brings certain wisdom, but true growth is measured in understanding of ourselves, of others, of the harmony we share with the world. That understanding never truly ends. It's a continuous process, like the tide that comes and goes. She reached for a small mortar and pestle, crushing a mixture of herbs that released a pleasant, calming fragrance. I strive to help the islanders maintain equilibrium. Physical wounds are one thing, but emotional and spiritual well-being are equally important. And just as our bodies need nourishment, so do our minds and hearts. Is that what led you to establish this clinic? Gulliver asked, watching her grind the herbs with practiced ease. In part, she replied. Long ago, I learned from the Houyhnhnms about the importance of living in balance with nature and one another. They had no need for deception, for cruelty, or for meaningless conflict. Here, I've tried to foster that same spirit. When someone falls ill, we treat not just the ailment, but the life circumstances that led to it. Stress, isolation, or maybe a deeper sorrow. As she finished preparing the herbal mixture, she poured hot water from a kettle into 2 cups, then sprinkled in a pinch of the crushed blend. Steam rose, carrying a soothing aroma of mint and lemon balm. She handed 1 cup to Gulliver, who took a careful sip. The warmth spread through him, relaxing muscles he hadn't realized were tense. This is quite good, he murmured, savoring the flavors. Reminds me of the teas from my journeys in Asia, yet there's something distinctly local about it too. Saraphina smiled. A perfect example of blending old and new. We learn from the outside world while staying true to the essence of who we are as an island community. The same goes for personal growth. We accumulate experiences, but we must integrate them into our deeper understanding of self. They sipped quietly for a few moments, letting the peace of the clinic envelop them. Gulliver found himself reflecting on the small worries and anxieties he'd carried with him. In this calm haven, they felt oddly distant, as if the soothing environment itself was persuading him to let them go, at least for a little while. I see that everyone here respects and admires you, Gulliver said, setting his empty cup down. Your presence is reassuring, like you hold the island's heartbeat in your hands. Saraphina's expression turned thoughtful. I view my role more as a gentle shepherd than a commander. Healing isn't about asserting power. It's about guiding people toward their own capacity for well-being. The islanders know this clinic is open for all, whether they suffer from physical wounds, heartbreak, or just need a quiet moment to reconnect with themselves. Outside, a mild breeze rustled the vines. Sunlight shifted across the floor, forming patterns that danced like spirits across the earthen surface. Gulliver breathed in, feeling renewed by the hush of this place. "You know," Saraphina said gently, "the islands may have changed, but the lessons remain the same: compassion, truth, and harmony. It's our duty to continue growing, just as trees reach for the sun and roots delve deeper into the earth." Gulliver found himself smiling, an unforced, genuine expression of contentment. "I needed to hear that," he said softly. "Sometimes, after all my travels, I forget that growth is an ongoing journey, not a destination we simply arrive at one day." Saraphina stood, offering him her hand. "Then let's continue that journey tonight. There's to be a community gathering by the lighthouse, and it would be an honor to have you there. You'll meet more of our friends, share food, and perhaps find some of the answers you seek." He rose, feeling lighter in both body and spirit. "I'd be delighted to attend, and thank you, Saraphina. You've already reminded me of why I yearn to come back to these shores, to reconnect with a wisdom greater than myself." She placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes warm and steady. "We all illuminate each other's paths. It's how we find our way in the world. Now go, enjoy the fresh air and your friends. If ever you need me, you'll know where to find me." As Gulliver stepped out of the clinic, the sun shone brighter, and the soft wind chime melodies followed him. In his heart, he carried an appreciation for the quiet power of compassion and the enduring truth that to heal others, we must also remain open to healing ourselves. And in that realization, he felt one step closer to the peace he had come here to find. Chapter 6. The Lighthouse's Secret. Night unfurled its velvet cloak over Gulliver's Isles, and the community dinner by the lighthouse was in full swing. Torches lined the pathway, illuminating smiling faces and tables laden with local dishes: grilled fish wrapped in banana leaves, roasted vegetables, fresh fruit salads, and sweet pastries drizzled with coconut syrup. Gulliver moved among the islanders, exchanging stories and laughter. He recognized some familiar faces from his earlier voyage, though they bore the marks of time. Newcomers, too, greeted him with warm curiosity, eager to welcome the man whose name had, over time, become a legend among them. Amid the murmured excitement, Captain Thorne tapped a wooden spoon against a metal pan, calling for the group's attention. Conversations hushed, and all eyes turned to the makeshift stage at the foot of the lighthouse. "My friends," Thorne began, voice carrying gently on the night breeze, "tonight we celebrate unity. Long ago we were divided by many things: politics, traditions, pride. But with open hearts and guidance from some very special individuals," he looked meaningfully at Gulliver, Alara, and Saraphina, "we've grown into a family that supports and uplifts one another. Let the lighthouse be a symbol of that light we share." The crowd cheered, raising cups of fruit punch in a collective toast. Alara approached a wooden lever at the base of the lighthouse. With emotion, she engaged a mechanism that set the great lantern above into motion. Within moments, a steady beam of light poured out across the sea, illuminating the dark waves. Cheers erupted again, and Gulliver felt a surge of pride at how far these people had come. After the applause subsided, Thorne turned to Gulliver. "There's something I think you'd like to see, something we discovered while constructing the lighthouse. Would you do us the honor of joining us inside?" Intrigued, Gulliver nodded. Alara and Saraphina joined them, and the four slipped away from the bustling crowd. Within the lighthouse's lobby, the warm glow of oil lamps danced off the polished walls. Alara led them to a stone spiral staircase that wound up into the tower, but instead of ascending, she guided them to a hidden door beneath the steps. "During the early construction phase," she said, producing a small iron key, "we stumbled across a sealed chamber. We didn't realize it was here because it predates the lighthouse itself. Given everything we know about the island's history, this could be significant." She slid the key into a hidden keyhole, and with a faint click, the door opened. A rush of cool, musty air greeted them. Holding lanterns aloft, they descended into the darkness. The stone steps spiraled downward, each echoing footstep stirring dust and time-worn secrets. They entered a subterranean room lined with shelves upon shelves of scrolls, manuscripts, and objects carefully stored in wooden crates. At the center stood a pedestal bearing a leather-bound tome, its edges gilded with old gold leaf. Gulliver's pulse quickened. It felt like stepping into a lost library of the island's soul. Captain Thorne carefully lifted the cover of the ancient book, revealing pages of intricate script and illustrations. "We've only just begun translating it, but from what we gather, it documents the founding of Gulliver's Isles, stories passed down through generations and lost to our modern memory." Alara ran her fingers reverently over the symbols. The text is a mix of different languages, some archaic form of Lilliputian script, others reminiscent of Brobdingnagian dialects, and even a few influences from the Houyhnhnm Honems. Whoever compiled this knowledge wanted to preserve the essence of what these islands once were, and could become. Saraphina tilted her lantern, allowing more light to spill across the pages. It also speaks of a guiding light, prophesying a beacon that would unite the island's people in times of great turmoil. Perhaps this lighthouse was destined long before we even conceived of it. Gulliver felt a chill, but it wasn't fear, it was awe. "Do you think this is why the island has changed for the better? Because of a collective shift inspired by these hidden truths?" Captain Thorne nodded thoughtfully. "Whether it's prophecy or collective will, something led us to build the lighthouse precisely where we did. We found remnants of an older foundation, stones arranged in a pattern that perfectly aligned with the cardinal points. The synergy between the old and the new is uncanny." They spent time carefully examining the manuscripts, each page revealing snippets of folklore, moral teachings, and genealogies linking various factions of the islanders. Some texts detailed fierce conflicts that once rocked Gulliver's Isles, resolved through alliances and the discovery of common ground. Others depicted celebrations and traditions, seeds of unity that had blossomed over generations. One scroll, more brittle than the rest, contained illustrations of a figure travelling by sea, a silhouette that bore a striking resemblance to Gulliver himself. Beneath it were symbols that seemed to suggest an arrival during an age of transformation. Saraphina placed a gentle hand on Gulliver's arm. "It appears you've been woven into this tapestry for longer than you might have realized." An odd mixture of wonder and responsibility welled up inside him. He'd always thought of his voyages as chance encounters, but what if there was some thread of destiny at play? "If this is all true, then perhaps my earlier travels here were not as accidental as I believed." Alara gave him a reassuring smile. "Accidental or destined, you've certainly played a part in inspiring change, just as the island has changed you. This library of secrets reminds us that every step we take might echo through time in ways we can't fully understand." They continued exploring the chamber, unearthing fragments of artifacts, carvings in stone, half-faded paintings, old navigational instruments. Each piece added dimension to the island's story, one that stretched back further than any of them had realized. Eventually, they returned to the open book on its pedestal. "I believe," Captain Thorne said softly, "we're meant to learn from this legacy. The lighthouse serves as the modern answer to an ancient call for unity, and we, Each of us are stewards of this wisdom. A reflective hush filled the chamber. Gulliver felt as though he stood at the confluence of past and future, bridging all the lessons he'd learned in his travels. He thought back to the young man he'd once been, courageous but often naive, and certainly unaware of any grand role he might play in history's unfolding tapestry. "We should share these discoveries," Gulliver said finally. "Not all at once, but carefully, thoughtfully. The islanders deserve to know their roots, to understand that the beacon they cherish today was dreamt of by those who came before." Alara closed the book gently, her voice hushed with reverence. "We will. This isn't just about the past, it's about who we choose to be now and tomorrow." They left the hidden chamber behind, securing the door, but taking with them the memory of the knowledge it contained. When they emerged back into the lighthouse's lobby, the soft hum of the celebration reached their ears. The night sky glowed with stars, and the lighthouse's beam stretched across the water, guiding invisible ships and, perhaps, kindred spirits who wandered the seas. Outside, the laughter and music enveloped them once more. Captain Thorne, Alara, and Saraphina parted to mingle with the other islanders, leaving Gulliver standing alone for a moment. He looked up at the bright lantern, feeling its steady beam pulse like a heartbeat against the night. If the old texts held any truth, his presence here was more than a coincidence. But even if it was all happenstance, he couldn't deny the significance of what he'd witnessed. A community transformed by empathy, art, healing, and shared purpose. And the lighthouse, like a silent sentinel, reminded him that guidance often arrives when you need it most, if only you keep your eyes open to the light. Chapter 7. Reflections by the Sea. The festivities wound down in the early hours before dawn. One by one, islanders made their way home, torches snuffed out, laughter fading into the hush of the night. By the time the last musician had gently placed his instrument aside, Gulliver found himself drawn toward the nearby shore, craving a moment of solitude. Stars still shimmered overhead as he walked along the dark beach, the cool sand massaging his feet. In the distance, the lighthouse stood tall, its beam sweeping across the water like a watchful eye. He realized how comforting that light was, even from afar, an unspoken reassurance that one is never truly alone. He settled on a smooth rock near the water's edge. The gentle rhythm of the waves lulled him into a contemplative trance. He thought about the hidden chamber and the artifacts they had discovered. Centuries of knowledge lay tucked beneath the lighthouse, bridging generations of conflict, unity, and hope. He mused on how so many stories, like his own, intertwined in ways that were impossible to predict. His own journey, from naive adventurer to a traveller seeking meaning, had led him here. There was a time when he'd chased discovery for the sake of novelty, collecting stories like souvenirs. Now, he sought understanding and genuine connection, realizing that the greatest discovery often lies in human hearts, rather than on any map. He recalled Saraphina's talk of balance, body, mind, and spirit, as well as Alara's passion for creativity that unites past and future. Captain Thorne's evolution from a proud, petty ruler to a compassionate leader underscored the transformative power of humility and collaboration. Each of them personified a piece of the island's collective wisdom. A memory drifted up from the recesses of Gulliver's mind. He remembered standing in a ship's crow's nest, scanning the horizon for land, desperate for something new to conquer or claim. Yet, through storms and shipwrecks, he'd learned that true conquest lies in overcoming one's own pride and fears, while true discovery emerges in the quiet exchanges of friendship. A soft breeze ruffled his hair, carrying the distant hoot of a nocturnal bird. He felt a sudden wave of gratitude for the second chance to be here, to witness how these people had grown. and to realize he too had grown. Maybe not in a loud or dramatic way, but in a quiet shift of the heart that only becomes evident upon reflection. Gulliver gazed up at the stars. They seemed impossibly bright against the dark sky, scattered like seeds across a cosmic field. He imagined each star as a link in the grand chain of existence, each shining in its own space and time, yet contributing to the collective tapestry overhead. He let his mind wander to the possibility of the future. Should he remain here for a while, share his own lessons, and perhaps pen new chapters in the island's evolving story? Or would he eventually set sail again, carrying these fresh insights to far-off shores in need of a guiding beam? Footsteps in the sand pulled him from his thoughts. He turned to see Saraphina approaching, her silhouette softly illuminated by the moonlight. "I thought I'd find you here," she said gently. "You have the look of a man who needs the sea's counsel." Gulliver offered a small smile. "Guilty as charged. The sea has always been a friend to me, a mirror that helps me see myself more clearly." She sat down beside him, drawing her robe around her to stave off the night chill. "Do you remember how you felt the first time you washed ashore on these islands?" He chuckled ruefully, confused, exhausted, in awe. It was as if my world had flipped upside down. I learned so many lessons, some painfully, but eventually I came to cherish what these shores taught me. Saraphina nodded, glancing at the rolling waves. "You know, the stories say that the sea can be both cruel and kind, a teacher who tests us just as easily as it comforts us. Perhaps that duality is necessary. Without hardship, we wouldn't truly appreciate peace. Without questions, we wouldn't truly value answers." They watched the moonlight shimmer on the water for a few more beats of silence. Then she spoke again, her voice almost a whisper. "In my healing work, I often remind people that the body and the spirit both need time to process. Sometimes we must pause to listen. That's what you're doing, isn't it?" "I believe so," Gulliver said softly. "I came here searching for closure, but I think I've found a beginning instead. New friendships, new truths, a renewed sense of purpose. Life keeps surprising me." Seraphina's smile was like a gentle tide. "Surprises keep our souls awake. Embrace them. Let them guide you to wherever you're meant to go next, be it here or beyond." They fell silent once more, lulled by the hush of the surf. The lighthouse beam swept across the shore, illuminating the endless horizon in brief rhythmic intervals. Each flash felt like a pulse, a reminder that time marches on, offering us fresh moments to learn and to love. Eventually, Saraphina rose, her silhouette outlined by starlight. "I'll leave you to your thoughts. The night has a way of whispering truths we don't hear in the daylight." Gulliver nodded. "Thank you, Saraphina, for everything." With that, she drifted away, leaving him alone with the sea and the moon and the quiet promise of tomorrow. He breathed in the crisp night air, letting the tension in his body dissolve. The steady whoosh of the tide against the sand served as a lullaby, each wave gently erasing the footprints behind him, reminding him that life, too, is an ever-evolving canvas. He placed a hand over his heart and closed his eyes. In the darkness of his mind's eye, he saw the lighthouse beam cutting through the blackness, lighting a path not just for ships at sea, but for the weary soul in search of meaning. In that radiant glow he felt a calm certainty bloom. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it with the wisdom gleaned from these islands and the hope ignited by their gentle guiding light. Chapter 8. A New Beginning. Morning arrived with a soft pink glow stretching across the horizon. Gulliver woke in a small guest cottage provided by the islanders. Outside, the air carried the smell of fresh bread and the sound of cheerful banter. He dressed quickly and stepped into the sunlight, feeling a lightness in his heart that he hadn't felt in years. Captain Thorne stood by the docks, organizing barrels of supplies. Fishermen hauled nets from their boats, while children ran past, chasing each other between crates of shrimp and baskets of seashells. The entire scene bristled with productivity and camaraderie. Thorne waved Gulliver over, a broad grin on his weathered face. "Good morning, friend," the captain said, clapping a hand on Gulliver's back. "I trust you slept well. We're preparing for a small celebration at midday near the lighthouse. A final farewell to the old ways, if you will, and a welcome to our continued journey of unity." "Sounds wonderful," Gulliver replied. "How can I help?" Thorne's eyes shone with gratitude. "We could use another pair of hands setting up tables and banners. After that, perhaps you'd like to say a few words to the crowd. They'd be eager to hear from you." Though the idea of speaking publicly made Gulliver's stomach flutter, he nodded. "I'd be honored." They spent the morning working side by side, hoisting tables into place and draping them with bright woven cloths courtesy of Alara's workshop. Saraphina arrived with baskets of fresh herbs and flowers, distributing them to children who gleefully decorated the banners. The scent of rosemary, thyme, and blooming roses hung in the warm air, giving everything a festive aura. By midday, the path to the lighthouse was lined with colourful ribbons fluttering in the breeze. Musicians played cheerful tunes on flutes and drums, drawing the islanders to gather under the bright sunshine. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, yet there was an undercurrent of calm pride, like a community that knew its place in the world and cherished every moment of it. Alara, radiant in a flowing dress, dyed in deep blues and greens, took the stage first. She spoke of the island's artistic renaissance, how creation and innovation had become a way to preserve and honor their history. She thanked her apprentices, praising their energy and fresh perspectives. Next, Saraphina addressed the crowd. She emphasized the importance of compassion and holistic well-being, reminding everyone that true health was a communal effort. The crowd listened intently, applauding when she acknowledged the many families she had helped over the years. Finally, Captain Thorne gestured for Gulliver to step forward. Heart pounding gently, Gulliver climbed onto the stage. Dozens of eyes watched him with genuine warmth. He cleared his throat, letting the hush settle before speaking. "My friends," he began, voice steady though tinged with emotion. "I came here after many years away, expecting to find the Gulliver's Isles of my memory. Instead, I discovered a place transformed. You have taken the best of who you were and woven it into something extraordinary. Through unity, creativity, and compassion, you've built a community that stands as a beacon for us all." He paused to glance at the lighthouse, its white tower gleaming. "Like the lighthouse, each of you shines a light, on each other, on travelers like me. You remind us that growth and understanding don't end with age. They continue as long as we keep our hearts open." Looking around at Thorne, Alara, and Saraphina, he felt a rush of gratitude. "I've seen how old grudges dissolved into new friendships, and I've witnessed how fresh ideas blossomed from the seeds of tradition. Let us continue to learn from one another, to share what we have, and to guide each other through life's storms. After all, we are each other's light." Applause erupted. Some islanders cheered, while others simply smiled with tears in their eyes. Gulliver felt a wave of relief and joy coursing through him. He stepped down, and Captain Thorne embraced him, whispering, "Thank you." A celebratory feast ensued. Tables overflowed with roasted vegetables, grilled fish, and sweet pastries. Children scampered around, giggling, while adults clinked cups in toasts. Musicians played lively tunes, and some couples danced in the open space. The vibe was one of celebration but also profound unity, as though each person was an essential note in a grand musical composition. After the meal, Gulliver found a moment of quiet near the lighthouse steps. He gazed out at the sea, reflecting on how this homecoming had been more meaningful than he ever anticipated. A gentle tap on his shoulder drew his attention. Alara stood there, eyes shining. "I'm glad you decided to speak," she said. "Your words touched many hearts today." He bowed his head in thanks. "I meant every one of them. This place has given me far more than I ever gave it." She placed a hand on his arm. "Perhaps you're still giving. Don't underestimate the impact you can have." Before he could reply, Captain Thorne and Saraphina approached, wearing identical smiles. "We've been talking," Thorne said, "and we'd like you to stay on for a while if you're willing. You could help us study the texts we found beneath the lighthouse, maybe even write a chronicle of the island's history and its vision for the future." Saraphina nodded. "You'd be free to come and go as you please, of course, but your experiences could help shape a new era of understanding." Gulliver felt tears threaten. I'd love to," he managed. "At least for a time. I think there's more for me to learn here." The three of them grinned, and in that moment, Gulliver sensed he was exactly where he needed to be. He cast one more glance at the horizon. The sea would always be there, calling him to new adventures. But for now, the stable glow of the lighthouse felt like the best harbour he could ask for. Epilogue. Farewell and fare forward. Weeks melted into months, and Gulliver remained on the island, immersing himself in daily life. Mornings saw him in the hidden chamber beneath the lighthouse, translating the old manuscripts with Captain Thorne. Afternoons he'd visit Alara's workshop, learning about new crafting techniques while sharing tales of foreign lands. Evenings often found him at Saraphina's clinic, helping prepare herbal blends and discussing the fine balance of mind, body, and spirit. He penned journal entries about the island's evolution, the wisdom gleaned from its people, and the personal revelations that accompanied his extended stay. As time passed, he felt the gentle tug of new horizons calling him. The sea was part of his soul after all, yet he also knew that a piece of his heart would remain here, interwoven with the lighthouse's shining beacon. On the day of his departure, the islanders gathered at the docks to bid him farewell. Captain Thorne handed him a small, hand-carved compass, etched with the lighthouse's emblem. Alara offered a leather-bound journal filled with sketches of their shared projects and daily life on the isle. Saraphina pressed a small pouch of herbs into his palm, explaining they were for clarity and peace on long voyages. As Gulliver stepped onto the Sea Maiden, he looked back at the assembled crowd, friends, mentors, and kindred spirits. They waved and cheered, eyes bright with both gratitude and the promise of future reunions. The sails caught the wind, and the ship pulled away from the harbour. Gulliver watched the shoreline grow distant, but the silhouette of the lighthouse remained a steady pinprick of light, even against the morning sun. He felt no sadness, only a profound sense of completeness. Whatever new adventures lay ahead, he would carry with him the spirit of Gulliver's Isles, the open-hearted leadership of Captain Thorne, the creative wisdom of Alara, the compassionate balance of Saraphina, and the unwavering beacon of unity that bound them all. As the wind guided him toward the horizon, Gulliver whispered a silent promise to return one day. After all, a lighthouse is not just a beacon for ships at sea, it's a calling for the hearts that long to find their way home. Fare forward, dear reader. May this tale of reflection and rediscovery remind us all that every ending cradles the seed of a new beginning, and every distant shore might just be the place that feels most like home. Above all, may the lighthouse's light guide you wherever your dreams may lead.
Wind in the sails, let's take flight to distant lands beyond the sight. giants and Lilliputians alike, in a world where dreams take flight. Gulliver's tales, they twist and turn, in every port new wonders learn, from tiny folks to giants tall. Wanderlust, let's see it all, across the seas where storms do brew, a flying island waits in view. Strange lands stretch both near and far, guided by the evening star. Gulliver's tales, they twist and turn, in every port new wonders learn, from tiny folks to giants tall. Wanderlust, let's see it all. A realm of horses wise and free, whisper tales of mystery. Voyages through space and time, in each adventure find a rhyme. Feathers in the morning sun, stories end but never done. Friends made in the oddest places, in our hearts their memory traces. Gulliver's tales, they twist and turn, in every port new wonders learn, from tiny folks to giants tall. Wanderlust, let's see it all. See it all. A realm of horses wise and free, whisper tales of mystery. Voyages through space and time, in each adventure find a rhyme. Feathers in the morning sun, stories end but never done. Friends made